All right, as a user, I actually am managing a laptop, as well as a mobile phone, as well as a tablet. All of the information is actually kind of, well, synchronized. How does that happen? Find out more next.
You're watching IT Pro TV.
There are support structures out there that you and I may not actually know about, and things are just working in the background. Wes Bryan's going to actually dispel some of those mysteries for us here. So, Wes, what are we going to actually talk about today?
You know, in the section where we talk about mobile devices, it's important to be able to support the applications. And one of the ways we do that, Ronnie, is through synchronization of our important data. And in this episode, what I'd like to show you is some of the different types of stuff that we synchronize, talk about why we would even do that, look at some business or enterprise level technologies, and then finally show you how we can do this in a centralized fashion if you have multiple hundreds, thousands of mobile devices and your corporation needs to support them. We're going to show you how you can do that through centralized administration.
All right, let's get started. Head on over to the bench.
All right, everyone, join me. All right, and on my computer screen, what you're going to see is that we have two mobile devices, and what our goal is to synchronize some of the different things, applications, if you will, and the data surrounding it. Why would we want to synchronize devices? That's the first thing that we need to talk about. When we talk about mobile device synchronizations, it's important to understand that we need, and people need access to their information. And in a day and age where we have so many different devices, it could be a laptop, could be a tablet that we have here, could be a cell phone, people want that unified access to their information across multiple different devices. And that's why device synchronization is so important, right? I want to talk very briefly, though, about something that you might see on your devices. So for instance, if I go into Wi-Fi, you're going to see that we have a series of data utilization here too. Now on Wi-Fi, a lot of times you're not too worried about data caps because it's not being charged over a cellular network. But I do want you to understand that when we look at our settings here and on our cell phone, we're going to see that if we scroll up to our mobile network, right, notice that I haven't used any data so far yet. But if I, let's say, happen to have a 3 gigabyte data capacity, then I need to keep in mind that when we synchronize information, that I could be synchronizing it over the cellular network, and that could chew away at that data cap. So that is important. Like I said, not so important when we talk about Wi-Fi, but it is important when we talk about cellular communications. Now, there are a couple of different things that we need to synchronize, right? You could have things like commercial email, like Outlook that you might have to sync. I know that's what we use here at IT Pro TV. Or you could have something like a third-party email application, and I'm using as an example something like Gmail, right? Or Google's, a Google account. Notice that we can synchronize our files, individual files. We could put larger, not just individual files, but a lot of different data up into like a Drive account, OneDrive if you're in the Microsoft sphere. We could synchronize our email, our calendar, our photos, and that's important because if I'm using the device on the left, well, I'm going to have access to that information. If I'm using the device on the right, I still want to have access to that information. So one of the things I want to show you here is that on the tablet, if I open my email, I have access to my email on this side. But in order to set that up and have access to the Gmail side, what I have to do is I actually have to make sure that we set up our Gmail account, right? Notice that it's asking me, do you want to set up an account, add an email address, right? So I'm going to go ahead, and since we're in the Google sphere, I'm going to go ahead and I will set up our Google or our Gmail account. And it could ask you to authenticate, if you have already authenticated in the past, it might just reach out. It might have some of that cached information. Keep in mind that when you're doing synchronization, it's important to get the username right. It's also important, if you will, to make sure that you have the password correctly. Now, we're going to let these go ahead and synchronize, Ronnie, and while we're doing that in the background, I want to go ahead and I want to bring up a page because there's another technology that they talk about, and that is something known as ActiveSync. ActiveSync is a technology that's been around. See, we think about synchronizing our email, we think about synchronizing our calendar, our contacts, if you will, and we don't think about that much today, but there was a day and age where this was a very brand new technology, and the way you would do that on an Exchange server is the administrator would set up Microsoft's ActiveSync. And very generically, you don't need to read all this, but if you want more information, maybe you're in a certification endeavor, or maybe you're supporting this, you can have right here Microsoft documentation. We'll put it in the learner resources for you so you have access to it, and it does the same thing that we're talking about doing here in the background on our cell phone and our tablet. So this is the Microsoft ActiveSync that we need to be able to just kind of understand and identify what it's doing for us.
And so Wes, with ActiveSync, can that work across multiple platforms?
Yeah, that's one of the benefits, Ronnie, when it comes to ActiveSync. You know, in a Microsoft or a Windows-based environment, ActiveSync allows you the ability to connect iOS devices to your Exchange server. Now, in today's day and age, that isn't really that uncommon of a thing, right? iOS devices have come a long way, and being able to manage them in Windows devices is something that it certainly is something that has come a long way today, so it is a lot easier. But ActiveSync was one of those ones that kind of revolutionized that in the earlier days. Now, it looks like it finally, after it got done checking that info, it said, hey, you still need to log into this device. All right, so let's go ahead, and what we're going to do is we're going to log in. So I'm going to type the username here, and that's A+, all right, A+Demo101 at gmail.com. Now, the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to type in the password. Now, when we type in the password, we're going to just nothing to see here. We'll go ahead and we'll type it in. And let me go ahead and do that right now. We will get logged in here. And if I can type my password right. All right, so we've entered the password here. Let's go ahead, and what we'll do is we'll see if we can choose next, and hopefully, notice it tells me to turn on backup and sync, right? And that is this little spot right here. And if I turn on backup and sync, it's going to synchronize my information. It's giving me some of the terms of service and some of the privacy stuff that I have to agree to, right? The end user license agreement, right, which probably means something like they'll sell all of your data and you're agreeing to that. But notice that we're doing things like backing up to Google Drive. That's the synchronization part, right? And you can see backing up apps, data, call history, contacts, passwords, right? And your backups, they talk about being securely encrypted. So now that I do that, it'll go through the process of checking the info, and I can dive into, take me to Gmail where it says, and when we do that, what we should see, and let's go ahead and say got it, and let me dismiss this real quick so we can actually get to our our inbox, right? And what I can see here, notice on the left-hand side there, Ronnie, I can see Code Projects and Google Community. Over here, Code Projects and Google Community. So that gives me the ability to synchronize these across multiple devices, and that's one of the benefits of synchronization. And that's the big key takeaway here, is the benefit that I can now use my data across multiple devices, right? And that's important for a lot of people. Within any enterprise level environment, and even home users as well. So that's how we can support, and some of the things that we can do with the mobile device synchronization.
Now, along with that, we were talking about the idea also of mobile device management. Tell us a little bit more about that.
So we did this with just a single device, all right? And you've seen that it takes a little bit of setup, right? Well, we also have things like mobile device management that allows us to do this in a centralized fashion and allows us to do it at scale, and that's the big thing. Centralized administration, reduce the administrative complexities of managing multiple devices, but at the same time, allow the scalability so that we have the solutions to manage these devices. We can also do things like mobile application management as well. So for instance, you might hear MDM and MAM, M-A-M, and what that means is just a centralized approach to distributing applications to these mobile devices. Let me show you what I mean here. I'm actually in what's known today as the Microsoft Endpoint Manager. Those of you that have maybe seen some of the mobile device management solutions know that this is actually the evolution of what used to be called Microsoft Intune, and then even earlier Windows Intune. And that kind of lends itself to what we've talked about. In the earlier days, it was just called Windows Intune because you would manage Windows devices. But iOS devices can be managed here as well. Android devices can be managed here as well. And what I can do is I can get an instant heads up of, well, what is the state of our devices? I can see things like device compliance, right? What is the service currently, right? What is the account status? And that's just a quick heads up in the dashboard. But we can look at the devices that are currently enrolled in the MDM solution. All right, and we'll give this Blade a second. Looks like we got a couple of Windows devices, but notice, Ronnie, all of the different devices that we can manage here, right? Android, iOS, iPad iOS, Mac OS, Windows Mobile for all 2 people that actually use Windows Mobile. But we have that ability, right? We can look at compliance status. We can look at the configuration status. So a lot of things that we can do in a centralized fashion to make our devices easier to manage. Look at the applications. We can also deploy applications, and we can do this by platform. Windows, iOS, iPad OS, if you will, Mac OS, and Android. We can apply policies. We can apply app configuration policies. So Ronnie, I don't need to go over to your mobile device and say, hold on a second, let me see your device. All right, where's the setting? Let me go ahead and do the configurations. No, we don't have to do that. We enroll this device, and I can do it from a centralized location.
Yeah, the neat thing about these devices, especially for a company, right, is that all of those mobile devices can come underneath this one umbrella, and then we can set the policies for them that we want. What Wes also showed us, of course, using Gmail, whatever I was going to say, using Gmail, that's good for the synchronization part, you know, for a regular user. But inside of a company, you're more than likely to see, of course, with everybody bringing tablets and phones onto the network, or they're actually being issued them, they'll probably follow underneath some type of mobile device management like what we're talking about, right?
Most definitely. And, you know, just real briefly, right, this isn't a security episode, but it is important to understand that we can also do things like, for instance, what I show you here is endpoint security, right? We can deploy things like, for instance, antivirus, and the blades are going to kind of mess up a little. Let me do that a little bit different there, right? We can manage antivirus, disk encryption, if you will, EDR, endpoint detection and response. The other thing that we can implement here is require you to use MFA, multi-factor authentication, and that's important when it comes to your mobile devices because mobile devices can be stolen very easy. You want them to be, their accounts to be locked locally, but you also want to have to provide a second factor, not just a password and PIN, in order to get in them to strengthen the security. These are some of the concepts around mobile device synchronization and the application support that if you're in a certification endeavor, we would pay attention to the specifics, but I would also pay attention to the technologies if you're in a support role so that you can be successful when it comes time to support your mobile devices.
Thank you for watching IT Pro TV.